Do you feel that in a time when we are more connected than ever, we are drifting away from real human connection, especially to ourselves? I do. Hi, I'm Leticia Latino, and I want to invite you to join me and my very inspiring guests in exploring ways to reconnect to your essence, to your definite purpose, to what makes you tick. Are you ready? Hello, everybody. Welcome to Back to Basics. With me today is Shannon Martin. Shannon has been working in marketing and communications for many, many years, helping businesses communicate their messages and build community. Through her company, Style and Substance Communication, she currently manages communications for a couple of businesses and does freelance writing and editing. Shannon also serves as Director of Communications at Podbean, an innovative podcast hosting and service provider. As a longtime podcast fan, Shannon enjoys being able to help creators by understanding their challenges and offering solutions and resources. She also, because she has a background in social work and gerontology, provides content for family caregivers. There's other very exciting things about you, Shannon, but I just want to stop talking and say hello and welcome to Back to Basics.
Thank you. Very glad to be here with you. I've been enjoying your podcast, so it's always fun to come on as a guest.
Thank you so much. And I'm also a big fan of what you guys do to promote podcasts and to make them more visible over at Podbean. So, that's great work. But I know there's aspects of your life and the lifestyle you've created that are going to be very inspirational for our listeners. So why don't we start by the beginning? Share with me and with the audience, like, where are you from? How was your upbringing? What were you passionate about as a young girl?
Sure. Yeah, I was originally from the East Coast of the U.S. and I'm born in Virginia, grew up mostly in Maryland. And I guess I always had wanderlust. I was a huge reader, like nose in a book constantly. And so I traveled through stories a lot. And I loved just all kinds of books. And I remember especially having an affinity for, things that were in different cultures or sort of travel, but a lot of them were sort of these, stories. I don't know if this was a popular thing in my youth, where it was a story of like a girl that was either an orphan or she was adopted. Like I'm thinking Anne of Green Gables and these things. Yeah. So there's this interesting element of sort of travel or being outside of their place. And it's sort of things they were kind of maybe romanticized a bit. But I remember telling my parents at a pretty young age, I was actually asking them if they would send me to boarding school.
Oh, really?
I wanted to go somewhere else and be somewhere different. So, I was fortunate that, we took family trips and things growing up, but then starting in high school, I had the opportunity to go a couple of times overseas. I didn't do any study abroad in university or anything, but which I kind of regret, but things always work out in the end. And so I always had that kind of passion for learning and exploring. Definitely, that wanderlust, but a lot of it through books, through podcasts, but back then through movies. Mm-hmm. Books and that kind of thing. So that was always me. A lot of imaginary play. I remember too, when I was young, just all kinds of, creating stories of, playing grown-ups and playing, my friend and I moving to New York City as models and actresses.
Oh, that's good. That's what childhood is for, right?
Right. To a lot of those imaginative things. So, I think it changes a lot as we get older in terms of, we don't do some of that play, but I try to find that through still reading, through podcasts, and now through travel more. So
Yeah,
That's
well,
kind of
that's part of why I love, this question. And sometimes I know, if you're the audience, we know where we're gonna go. Like, what did you do when you were a child? But I think it's fun to remember that part of our lives, because by you sharing it, I'm sure a lot of people out there are saying, "Oh my God, I used to do that. I used to do exactly what you're describing as well." So it's just fun to remember that what we used to enjoy.
yes, for sure.
Yeah. And I can tell already, I mean, because I know a little bit about you, and you'll share more of where you are right now and the kind of lifestyle you created for yourself, which, it makes total sense with what you're sharing. But tell me about like when, on the career path, when you had these passions and then the time to see what you're going to do as a young adult. And how did you make those choices in terms of your career and what you went on and studied?
Yeah, it's interesting because at some point like many kids, some kids, I guess, know from day one what they want to be. But for me, I had that imagination. So I kept switching around from architect to, that was what I remember at some point, to different things. But by the time I would say middle school and definitely by high school, a lot things related to psychology in some way, like
Mhm.
child psychology or counseling or something like that. So something was there. I did have a lot of family background in social work, my mom, my great grandmother. So it probably comes a bit from that. So I ended up getting a double major in psychology and sociology, unsurprisingly.
Mhm.
And you can't really do anything with that.
Mhm.
So I immediately sort of planned to go to grad school. And I have this imagination and wanderlust, but I'm also very practical in a lot of ways. So I knew at that point, I had sort of determined from some courses and volunteer work that I probably was interested in doing something with elders, with the elderly side of social work. And there were opportunities to go to a graduate school in gerontology or to go get a master's in social work. And I thought, well, if I do social work, then if I don't end up liking working with the elderly, I could always switch.
Mhm.
I could do almost anything. I could be a private counselor, I could be a school counselor, all these things. So I pursued my master's in social work. And so my first jobs were kind of standard in that field. And what I ended up finding pretty quickly out about myself, the self-discovery process of working, is that although I love doing that and I love helping people, I'm not really wired to do very well in the stress that's involved with being really involved in these, life and death sort of things with people.
Mhm.
Eh, just yeah, it just was something I could not leave it behind.
Mhm.
At the end of the day, it's the kind of thing that, really, I mean, people's, lives were on the balance and families were stressed out, and I felt a lot more responsibility than I should. Was not very good at dealing with that. Now there are ways to deal with that, but I just kind of decided for me that it was better to be in sort of a different aspect of it. So I sort of started going in the direction of marketing and education and communications within that field. And
Mhm.
that's kind of how I bridged into doing that kind of stuff. So it started out with really doing communications and doing marketing. First, doing some marketing at a nursing home where I worked, where I was the social worker, but also like the admissions person. So you
Mhm.
had a lot of sort of PR pieces of that. And then moving around a bit with my husband, doing different jobs and things. I got more into the market. And when I moved to Florida, I went to work with a geriatric care management company. And I could do client work, but my idea was I really want to help them with promoting the company and doing the intake when families call in. So it's sort of a little bit of counseling, but it's also, marketing and even sales. And was able to, a small company. So I was able to work with them from the ground up, building really the first marketing plan and doing all that. I've been really lucky to work for small company, or I guess I've sought out small companies my whole life,
Mhm.
my whole working life. And it's been great because it lets you be, I mean, if you like that, it lets you be the jack of all trades. You kind of end up doing a bit of everything.
Yeah, yeah, I see what you're
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah.
No,
So I got more into that side of it, and really enjoy doing the communication stuff. And always being a reader, I guess at my heart, I always had the reading and writing kind of underlying all of it.
That's fantastic. I mean, I think you hit it on the nail when you said that, your career, is something you were passionate about, but there was an aspect of it that you weren't wired for, that you didn't enjoy. And I think that's really important, because I can relate that when I was studying, I thought I was going to be, a financial investor. Like, I was very drawn by the stock market and all that world. And I, had started my career there at Merrill Lynch and doing all that. And then at one point, kind of similar, of course, yours more meaningful in terms of life and death. But I realized I didn't like to have to ask people for money. Like when when you're a financial investor, at the end of the day, basically you have to ask people for money and to trust you with their money. And I'm like, I don't think I enjoy this very much. And then it prompted me to make a very important decision, which is to reroute where I thought I was going to be. So I think a lot of people out there, they just because they went into something, they think they're stuck there. And there's a lot to say that you were aware that you didn't enjoy that, and then you kind of course corrected.
Yeah, and very much like what you're saying, there's a lot of times a lot of things you can do that are where you can use, it's not, you don't have to scrap all of your education or what experience you've had thus far. You can make sort of a pivot or I'm working in this place and I see this job where I'm starting to do a little bit of this, and I really want to take that piece of it. And for me, then I did full-time sort of marketing for that company for a number of years. Again, my nature with work is that I worked, a lot of overtime and went full force with it, but I enjoyed it. And the good news about that, I guess, is that I, proved myself at that company. And my husband and I decided to make a little bit of a life change, and he was going to take a sabbatical from work. So I went to my boss and said, I'm planning to do this trip and leave. She said, quitting, or is there something we can work out? And I said, I hope so. That would be great. And at that time, things were becoming more digital in terms of marketing. So the timing was good. And so once again, sort of carving out a piece of what I was doing, and, not scrapping it at all, keeping that relationship that I had and the work I had built up, but yet moving into, okay, well, now I'm going to do something more part-time and where I can travel, staying with the same company, doing pieces I was already doing. And now the world is evolving, so we need to be focusing more on this anyway. So it kind of, worked out.
Well, yeah, I always say, if you ask for something, you might receive it. A lot of people say, that they never gonna approve me going, and I always say, ask. The worst that can happen is that they say no. And so that's great that you did ask. And so I want to backtrack, because I know you and your husband, that you must, obviously you're both travel lovers. And did I read somewhere that you both met on a plane?
Yes, we did.
I want to learn about that story. And then I know you have a travel blog, so I definitely want to get into that, because it sounds to me that it was a match made in the sky. Well, it's a match made in the skies, and you found someone that really shares one of your true passions, which is traveling.
Yes, yeah, we both, I sat down next to him on the plane. Actually, there was one seat in the middle. He was in the window and I was in the aisle. And to this day, we remain he a window person, me an aisle person, but now we have to compromise sometimes.
Yes, I imagine.
And we just started talking, and it's actually funny because I had a very rushed sort of trip to the airport, and I had been working right up until the last minute, and so I was kind of flustered and all of that. But we talked the whole time, and we were both. I was finishing up graduate school and moving to the city where he was living. So we were flying from the city where we're sort of both living to where we were both from, coincidentally.
Which is where to where?
So we were Atlanta.
Okay.
I was actually in grad school at University of Georgia, but going back and forth to Atlanta. And then we were both from Maryland. And I was
Oh,
going
wow.
for a friend's wedding, actually, not really to visit my family, but I did see them. And he was going home for a family visit. So we ended up, we met, but we ended up being somewhat from the same place, and not from the same town, but from the same area of the country. So we both, it's, fascinating that we're on a plane, living in different places, but yet kind of from the same background, same area. So.
That is awesome. I'm a big traveler and I always had that idea, like maybe I'll meet someone on a plane. It never happened for me. I'm glad it happened for you.
Yeah, I know a lot of times you sit down next to the people you don't really want to be seen.
Yeah, I met a tons of interesting people, but never I always had that romantic idea because it's very romantic, I think, to meet someone like your story right now. It's very romantic. But well, I did find mine on Match.com, which seems a little bit also incredible. But so that's great. And so you met, and that was how long ago?
Oh, more than 20 years
Oh
ago.
my God, that's
Yeah.
amazing. That's amazing. And well, and then you get married. Then I'm going to fast track because then you mentioned that because he was going to travel and he was going to take a sabbatical. Then you say, I'll go with you. And then you started traveling around the world, really.
Yeah. So we did a lot of travel in the U.S. After we were married. When we were our honeymoon, we went to Europe, and then we were traveling mainly in the U.S. And we actually went for an anniversary trip back to Europe, and we kind of both had you're sitting around on holiday, so you have more time to chat and think about things. And we said, "Gosh, we haven't done as much." We had this intention of doing more international travel, and we've enjoyed traveling in the U.S., but life just kind of takes its course, and we realize, we kind of don't want too much time to get away from us without seeing more. And I watched, as I said, had the wanderlust forever, so I watched the Travel Channel all the time and travel podcasts and everything. So I had some ideas, and it's a long story, but we were going to go work on a cruise ship.
Oh.
And yeah,
my husband and I have that as our retirement plan. It's funny you say that.
yeah, it could have been good. We ended up not deciding to do it, but we had already kind of set our plans in motion for his sabbatical, because he worked for a large company, so they had that built in where you could take a sabbatical if you had
that's great
opportunities. So, and I approached my company, and then we decided the cruise ship thing wasn't for us, but we still decided to pursue traveling. So we actually traveled around in the U.S. a bit first, road tripping. Rented out our home and did some trips to Canada. And then we spent 3 months in Spain. And then it was pretty much locked in that, okay, that's it. We're not going back home for good.
Mm-hmm. I see. And this is, and you're currently in Spain. Do you live there, or you're still moving around?
No, we do live here. So we were in Spain, and then that was 3 months. Then we ended up going back again because my job became something that I could do anywhere. And then my husband's job pretty much work from home back then anyway. I mean, most of his company did work from home. So we realized, there's nothing really that, even after his sabbatical, there's nothing really keeping us in one location. So we went back to Spain again for a while. Then we had the opportunity to go to Shanghai, China. Mm-hmm. And that's where we spent the last 8 years, almost 8 years.
Oh, wow.
So so we've been there, and that's one of those things we thought 2 or 3 years. It was, a dynamic and exciting place. We got to explore Asia a lot. We went almost every country in Asia. And, just a lot of dynamic stuff going on there, and really dynamic from a work perspective, and opportunities and seeing businesses grow. So it ended up being a lot longer than we expected, but it was fun and worthwhile. But our passion and love for Spain was always there. So we kind of always knew that eventually we'd make our way back here.
That's great. And by the way, they document all these travels. It's going to be on the show notes on the Two Who Traveled, right? Is the name of your blog? of your travel
Yeah.
blog?
Yeah, Two Who Travel, and we have a lot of posts, but I have not been great about keeping up the last few years, I would say, since I do a lot of writing for work. But
Oh,
I hope
I'm sure with all you've written, my audience
there's
has
plenty.
plenty
Yeah,
to catch up.
there's plenty to read. Yeah, I
Yeah.
need to do an update of the move to Spain. But I did two posts during the whole COVID year about kind of our transition and all of the crazy things that were going on with that transition. So that can kind of give you the update on.
I imagine. I imagine. So Shannon, I'm sure that there's people out there thinking, "Oh wow, that sounds so great, but I cannot do that. It's just impossible." I mean, obviously, when there's if anybody that has kids, they're linked to the school, and that's a problem. But what would you say? Like, what advice would you give to someone that wants to do the same things that you did? Like saying, you can go travel and you can design the life you want around your passion. What would you be your piece of advice?
I think you really do have to think about how passionate you are about it because it's a lot of effort. I mean, it definitely is, especially when you're talking about moving. There's kind of the digital nomad community, and that has challenges in and of itself. And especially if you do have a family, and then there's moving, sort of immigrating or being an expat, whatever you want to call it, to a different place. And that has its own, set of things you have to go through. We've become pretty used to dealing with all of that stuff and the bureaucracy and the setting up new bank accounts and dealing with things in different languages, but that's a lot. So you really have to sort of self-evaluate, I think, that it is something that's really important to you and that the sacrifices that you make are something you're willing to do. It's not for everybody. And I love the lifestyle. I love minimalism. And I know that's a big buzz thing nowadays, buzzword, but I don't care about the stuff. And we really discovered that when we did our first trip, because we still had our home and our things. But some people really love the comfort of having that home and those, the nesting and those things. So, and there's nothing wrong with that. So I think thinking about it, I think anyone can potentially do it. It helps to, have some grounding first. Like, we worked for quite a while, so we did have savings. We made different sacrifices and that kind of thing. That does help, but there's all kinds of different ways people can go about it. And yeah, even people, I mean, there's a lot of people out there on the road and out there living as expats and even digital nomads with kids and doing van life and all kinds of stuff. So it just kind of depends on your situation. And obviously, if you're in a relationship or a family, that it's more than one person involved. So that's something you have to consider. How does do the partners both feel the same way about it, and how will it affect the kids and all of that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, no, and definitely it's also being aligned as a couple, because I did have a boyfriend. He didn't like to travel, and that was the big writing on the wall for me, because I love to travel. I'm like, can I live all my life where every trip has to be like analyzed and thought out and all this stuff? And I knew it wasn't going to be, like probably a good match after a while. And thank God I found someone that loves to travel as much as I do. And that's why I joke around, but it's true. We also corporate people and all that. And sometimes say, well, when the kids are out of the house, then we can go and he's an engineer, but also he's a musician. So I say, you can play the guitar. I speak several languages. I can work as an international host on a cruise ship. And he would play on the band of the cruise. And for a while, we just have no, other things. It just be free spirit a little bit. I think there's something to be said about that. No attachment, that feeling of not big attachments, right?
Yes, yeah. And there's so many different ways to do it. That's the thing. So like you said, you could choose to do it at a certain stage in your life. You could do it short term. You could, I think right now, because a lot of people have been working from home and their companies are saying, oh, you're not going to go back to an office, then they're realizing, oh, I could do something. But, especially given the situation right now, I'm not going to travel from country to country per se, but I've always loved the mountains or the beach. Maybe we'll keep our home, keep our life relatively similar, but go spend this amount of time in this new place and explore. And so there's different facets of how you can tap into, whatever that passion is for you.
I love it. I love it. And that's why I say, Shannon would be a great guest because I know there's a lot of people that think and fantasize about this and they convince themselves that there's no way you can do it. But you're right. I know of people that have rented beach houses, just to go through this quarantine in a way where it's more manageable. And they're realizing like, oh, but this could become a lifestyle if I'm able to work remotely.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I think this year is definitely a time where a lot of people are rethinking so many things, and then companies are rethinking and realizing, I mean, my husband's company did it. I mean, years ago they started paring down on office space. I think, and a lot of big companies did, but I think this year, obviously, more so. But yeah, people that I know that were in those, especially those sales kind of roles and stuff where you were out and about anyway, a lot of them, years ago, the companies started saying, well, we don't have to have an office building. We can have everybody work at home and so that free kind of lifestyle. And yeah, and if you're relatively young and you're listening and you're thinking it's something you want to do, it's also something where you can think about how your career choice, what kind of career choices and what kind of opportunities might fit it very well. So I had a lot of friends in Shanghai that were international school teachers, and if you are interested in it or passionate about teaching, that's a really nice. It can be a really nice lifestyle. There's a lot of opportunities. So it's and a lot of them were actually fed up with educational systems where they were from. So they actually really enjoyed and appreciated the system of the international schools where they were and kind of high quality education.
Oh, that's great. I always love to, like I like to mentor young people, and I love those kind of tips where there's careers out there that people don't consider. And I think I mentioned in a different episode, but recently I was mentoring a group of young girls graduating from high school. And out of 35 young girls, I kid you not, probably 25 told me they wanted to become nurses.
Oh, wow.
And I say, there's no way on earth statistically this is possible, that they all want to become nurses. It's impossible. And one of the things I told them about is that exactly what you said, like, when you think of your life, how do you envision it? And it was surprising to hear how many said that they would love to travel the world and explore and all this stuff. And I would say, it's not that it's impossible, but that being a nurse maybe is not the career that is going to be the easiest to adopt to that kind of lifestyle. And just the thought, and maybe it is, maybe you're a nurse, you can make it happen. But the fact that they haven't envisioned what kind of life or what things they enjoy the most and try to find a career that adapts to that. It's very telling of our younger generations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right? Yeah. I mean, so many times we have either careers that we just assume because maybe culturally or our parents kind of sort of talk about this type of career or something, or for me, certainly there were certain things that were interesting to me and romanticized, but I didn't think a lot of times about the practical aspects of some of those things. So
exactly. So Shannon, what is the thing you like the most about Spain? I'm curious about this. Like, how did you and your husband decided? What makes you say, "Oh, yes, we're staying here"?
The lifestyle in general, I guess I would say, a more sort of work to live versus live to work, family oriented, enjoying longer meals, slower meals, things being closed on Sundays and closed for siesta and those kind of things. I just I had an appreciation for that. And also loved the food from day one of being here. So
Yes.
no,
I asked because, well, my family is Italian. I'm from Venezuela originally, but I've been in the States for 25 years almost. But, I've always said, besides the language, that in my case, it would be my mother, my main language, Spanish. I've always said that Spain probably would be the place where I would go to live if I had to pick one in Europe. I wouldn't even go back to Italy. I would probably go to Spain. So I kind of agree. That's why I guess I'm curious. But there's
Yeah.
something about those tapitas and the cañas and just the way they eat and that is very fascinating.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, it's a wonderful, I think, lifestyle. I mean, like every country, I mean, there's challenges, especially I think for, we're very fortunate because we're coming in, not looking we're not looking for a job. We weren't looking for a job here in Spain, so we didn't have to worry so much about the economic situation and the politics and that kind of stuff here. So, we're kind of in that privileged position where we can enjoy the lifestyle. But although I was talking to a Spanish guy yesterday, and he said, "Oh, I see that being the wave of the future, even for Spaniards, because some of the things he didn't see in the system really being fixed anytime soon." So he was saying, "I think a lot of us are going to be working, outside of the country or digitally or remotely, living here, still enjoying the lifestyle, maybe, but." Right now, a lot of people travel elsewhere and get jobs and like in healthcare, for example. But he was saying he thought that had a lot of possibility. But yeah, just going, and I mean, in Valencia, it's often sunny and beautiful, and I just love the mix of the old culture and the architecture and the nature. And actually, once we're back to being able to travel around again, the country itself, people sometimes don't realize how diverse Spain is, and all that we can, just staying within this one country, all of the different types of geography and even culture that you can encounter from the north, from the País Vasco, the Basque country, which is very different from, which we often think of like Sevilla and the southern Spain, Andalusia, when you have a picture in your mind of Spain and flamenco, and those are very different. And then there's Galicia, which is looks like Ireland or Scotland. And so there's just a lot to explore here in the history. And when I sit there and I'm eating my tapas and looking at like a castle, basically,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
feel really lucky.
Yeah, we always say my husband is Dutch, so we go to Europe pretty much every year, and we're blessed in that sense. And we always say that the difference is anywhere you are in Europe, for the most part, you don't have to go to a museum. You leave the museum.
Right.
And right, it's exactly what you said. And for in my own experience, I guess this podcast was born in Sicily, where my parents are from, because I feel that kind of back to basics. And a lot of the things you mentioned, if I had to put a finger on my own back to basics, it's exactly what you said. It's about, yeah, you work, but you don't live to work. You take time to eat, you take time to enjoy, you take time. I mean, in that sense, the European flair, and it's not in every country in Europe, obviously, or not every region, but they have this more than we have here in the US.
Yes.
Right? Would you agree?
Yes. Yes.
And so I think that's kind of, for me, it's like those aspects are my back to basics. Like, I am a very hard worker, but I need a little bit of that to be able to feel happy with my life and to feel fulfilled. And so it's great that you have the ability and to do it, and that you recognize that those things are also something that I guess fill your heart and fulfill the way of living.
For sure. Yes. Yeah, I agree. I'm also the same way. I'm a hard worker. And actually, I feel like being in this kind of lifestyle is really good for me, sort of psychologically, because I tend to be too caught up. I'm very caught up and very determined, and in work, in my work life, so I need to sort of see something different to see the balance. Otherwise, it's really easy for me to get too caught up in it and to kind of forget what's important. And I guess if this particular year has maybe reminded us of anything, it's your podcast name, Back to Basics, what's so important in our family and our, enjoying the moments that we have and that kind of thing. And that's something it helps me to have some external reminders of that also.
That's great. And so I obviously, as a last part of the interview, I want to ask you to share anything that's fun and exciting in your work life. I mean, the work you do at Podbean or any other of your initiatives that you're working on, anything in particular that you want to share with the audience?
Sure. Yeah, I think everything we're doing at Podbean is really exciting. It's such a fun company. So for those that, obviously, if you have a podcast, you may be familiar with Podbean because we do podcast hosting. So we do a lot of things on the podcaster side. And different tools for ways people can make money with their podcast. And the last year we launched a audio live streaming platform. And I think that's been really exciting because it kind of had this magical timing that we didn't know. We didn't know what was going to happen with the world, but that made it all the more useful and important for people. And so it was really podcaster focused because it was an audio platform, not video like a lot of live streaming is. So really focused on the storytelling and the interaction and people being able to call in like a radio show. So we're doing more and more with that. And we did a big podcast wellness week in the first week of December, which we used that platform and our podcasting platform to bring together sort of all the top wellness experts in the podcasting world and provide all this exciting content to people about, sleep issues, anxiety, mental health and physical health. And so in the next year, we'll do more of those sort of niche area podcast weeks, I think, with that platform. So a lot of sort of community building and that kind of thing. So there's always something exciting going on. It's just an industry that's changing and evolving so much. And we have the listener side too, because our app is also for people to listen to podcasts. So what I really like about it is that we kind of get to be involved with a lot of different aspects of whether you're the podcast creator or just someone that enjoys listening. We have some things that we can offer and ways we can help.
No, that's great. As a podcaster, I have to thank you because that's what really helps create the right platforms to disseminate podcasts. And it's amazing how many of them there are out there. I mean, I am fairly new and I've been at it for 2 years, but I can just see the difference since I started and now. And I think it's very good what you just shared because I know that out there in the audience, there are people that have thought about doing a podcast. And let me tell you, it's not that hard. If you have that idea and you want to go and do it, there's platforms that you can leverage and really would make it very easy for you to be on the air in no time. And so definitely I will add those links in the show notes so that you can explore more about that. And I mean, this is great, Shannon. I cannot end the interview without asking you, besides all you've shared, you've been a great guest because you've shared what things you're passionate about. And sometimes, we hear people sharing great careers and it takes me a while to really ask the question, what makes you tick? So besides everything you share, is there anything else that when times are rough, where you feel that you're kind of forgetting, who you are, your essence, what makes you tick? What is it?
I think it's sort of something I've already shared, but it's the underlying curiosity of life, like the desire to explore and continue learning. I think I don't know, one of my social media profiles, I put something like always be exploring and learning or something as my sort of tagline, because I find that if I'm feeling down or something, I need that. And so for me, a lot of times that means something as simple as going for a walk, but I like to go down. It doesn't have to be that I'm in Spain. I mean, no matter where I've lived, I can go down a different street. I can stop and look at the nature. But that and things like listening to new podcasts, finding new books. I love discussion groups. Mm-hmm. So I've been in a lot of book clubs in my life. And I also ran the Shanghai chapter of the Podcast Brunch Club, which is like a book club for podcasts. And and if anyone out there, if that sounds appealing to you, it's podcastbrunchclub.com. But there's chapters all over the world. A lot of them aren't meeting right now because of COVID, but there's also virtual meetings.
Oh,
Since I haven't,
great.
since I haven't been in Shanghai, I've been doing the virtual meetings, and it's just fun because we talk about a topic, and so it keeps, if you're not in school anymore, you sometimes might feel like you're not having much in terms of opportunities to learn, but there's opportunities every day. So that's what gets me back going if I'm feeling just kind of blah or unmotivated.
Wow, that's great. I think that's great advice. And I relate a lot to that. I always say my biggest fear is to feel that I am not using my brain and my capacity to underutilize it and go on automatic pilot. So I totally relate with that. And that's probably why I end up doing podcasts and crazy stuff like this, because that curiosity that you're mentioning is really a big driver. So thanks for sharing that. I think that would inspire others listening to just go for it, explore your curiosity, and see what happens. So thank you, Shannon. This has been fantastic. Thanks for taking the time to share your experience and your journey with us.
Sure, I was glad to.
Thank you so much. Until the next time. And I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you liked, please review, share, and just tell a friend. Thank you, and until a new episode of Back to Basics. You've been listening to Back to Basics. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook. If you haven't yet, subscribe, rate, and review this podcast on Apple Podcast or any of your favorite streaming platforms. This is the best gift you can give us. Join me next week for another Back to Basics conversation. And if you want to find out about other exciting things I'm working on, visit leticialatino.com. Thank you, and until the next time.